Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game SO. Today we're going to continue the series, the Unported Playlist, where I take a look at some of my favorite unported arcade games of all time. And today I have what I would consider Sega's #1 hidden gem outside of the arcade racing genre. That is because I am playing Planet Harriers, the sequel to Space Harrier and Space Harrier 2 on the Sega Hikaru board, or technically Demul emulation of it. That is because this board is incredibly rare and incredibly fragile, and even I haven't been able to find a working example of one in the 5 years that I've been searching for it. But honestly, that doesn't matter because emulation is good enough for me to sit down and enjoy what I consider to be one of the best Sega arcade games ever made. And obviously it was never ported home because you're watching it on the unported playlist, even though there was a rumor that this was going to be coming over to the GameCube around the launch of that, because it never actually made it to Dreamcast, because by the time this game came out, the Dreamcast was basically faltering as far as Sega was concerned, and honestly would have had to take a graphical downgrade as well. And that is because when this game released, press would say that this was one of the prettiest video games ever made and some of the most powerful hardware that existed in arcades for you to actually render 3D. The draw distances were absolutely massive. There was so much on screen at once. The level complexity and geometry was definitely there. The Sega Hikaru board kind of felt like the Sega Model 3 if it actually went to a Sega Model 4. And even though it is called Hikaru and at least in part is based on some Dreamcast era hardware, it really does have a Model 4 feel to it, even if that's not what it's actually called. But as we move into the first boss here, Volcandra, I can safely say that this game absolutely is just throwing everything at you visually as well as gameplay wise. It is going to be action-packed from start to finish, and by the time you're done with its about 40-minute runtime, you're going to feel like you just played 4 hours of video game in all the best ways possible, because once you hit start, this game does not let up until the credits scroll. As we move into the second level here, flying through the trees, I absolutely love how Planet Harriers kind of just uses the gameplay loop, feeling like a Space Harriers game, but completely different at the same time. You can run on the ground, but honestly there really isn't much of a benefit there. For the most part, this kind of feels like a 3D shmup versus a 2D shmup, and that definitely works for me. You have this lock-on mechanic, and you're going to see at the top of the screen, there is lock-on fuel. Every single enemy is going to take a certain amount of fuel to actually lock onto, and then when you lock onto them, when you release that button, it'll automatically send that shot out. But in between levels and different item shops, you're going to be able to increase the lock-on fuel, you're going to be able to buy more life for yourself, and get other bonuses, and those will persist after you continue the game as well. So it really is kind of designed for a more console-like experience, which really does lead me to believe that Sega did have plans to bring this thing home, because there's a lot of features here that would make it slightly quote-unquote easier to play in arcades and not make as much money, but would be really friendly for the home console audience. And trust me, this game is definitely not easy, so any sort of assist you can get, you're definitely going to be feeling like you're going to be accepting of that. But as we fly through, the action and intensity here is just absolutely straight up amazing. The sense of depth, that sensation of speed, as well as when the game slows down, it just feels like this living, breathing fantasy world where you're not quite sure why you're there, but you just know you have to shoot everything. And as far as the story in Planet Harriers is concerned, it's basically non-existent. The only thing you need to know is you're going to shoot a bunch of stuff until you beat the game, and that's basically how it ends. With a gigantic Cyclops eyeball just flying through all of this geometry. 10 out of 10 weird, 10 out of 10 amazing, and I love that his projectiles are also really small eyeballs, because this game will push a ton of polygons around, a ton of things on screen at once, and absolutely just run flawlessly. If there was ever going to be a Dreamcast 2 released, I really hope it would have been a combination of what NAOMI 2 was, as well as the best features of something like a Sega Hikaru board, because this thing absolutely just makes PlayStation 2 era stuff feel like it was a little bit weaker than what Sega could do in the arcades. And trust me, when it came to engineering complex 3D arcade hardware, Sega basically stood above everybody else when it came to graphical fidelity. But this game also has a 10 out of 10 soundtrack, so we're going to move into our first soundtrack sample, 45 seconds, but come back. I got a lot more Planet Harriers history for you, and a lot more review of the game, because I absolutely love this one. I mean, the level of audio you're getting there, the intensity in it, all the different sound effects and music at the same time just absolutely make this game feel like chaos, and that is absolutely what it is. Because we're going through this ravine here with all of the real-time lighting, all of these different characters coming towards us, trying to kill us, and two different paths, top or bottom, to take to see where maybe you'd get more power-ups or cash. It just absolutely feels like this game is controlled chaos in all of the best ways. And trust me, you want to pick up basically every gold bar, every gold piece, and every bag of money you see in the scene, because that is what you're going to use at the item shops in the middle of the level, as well as between levels to actually power your character up. Because trust me, you want to power them up as hard as you possibly can to make this game a little bit easier on you. I would be hyper impressed to see somebody 1cc this thing, because even on easy mode it absolutely doesn't pull any punches. But as we get to the Horror Sphinx here, I love Planet Harriers' sensation of creativity. It never explains why you're fighting these enemies, why in one area you have a Cyclops eye and the next area you have a Sphinx, but the thing is, every model is absolutely gorgeous, filled with polygons, and has a ton of creativity in it, and every single boss stage has its own unique hook. You don't worry so much about why Planet Harriers is doing whatever it is that it is. You just worry about the fact that you're trying not to die. Because I think I probably took about 12 continues in this playthrough, but it has been some years since I actually tried to practice this one. And even though it emulates really well in Demul these days, I am still trying to find an original Planet Harriers board, because I want to put this thing in a candy cabinet. I want to have an arcade flight stick wired up so I can just basically play that real hardware experience. But I would say this boss right here definitely reminds me a lot of Maze of the Kings, also by Sega. It doesn't seem to be borrowed from that game or used in that game, but if you're looking for another Sega hidden gem that basically no one talks about and absolutely bums me out, Maze of the Kings is a straight up 10 out of 10 light gun game. But this boss here just blowing all this fire around, everything going crazy with this structure turning in real time. The fact that it looked this good back in the year 2000 was just absolutely mind-blowing. But again, save your money, because you're definitely going to want to use a lot of these power-ups. Although it would be fun to try to do a hard mode 1cc, where you literally didn't buy anything in the shops, you just tried to beat the game without any continues on the original 3 hearts and the original lock-on fuel. Because trust me, you want to get as much lock-on fuel as possible. It can be a little bit difficult to hit enemies in the background with your standard shot, but that lock-on will absolutely lock to them so long as you get the reticle even slightly over them. And that is a really fun thing. If you're playing this game and you're not doing well, it is because you're not aiming correctly, not because the game is fighting you. Because the sensation of depth here is absolutely massive, and that draw distance is huge. You can see so many enemies coming towards you from a really long way away, so all you need to do is home in on them and destroy them before they even get a shot off. And because you do have range of motion in 3D as well, avoidance here of a lot of those projectiles can be done, but some of them basically, if you don't kill the enemy before they shoot, can be almost considered guaranteed damage. But let's do one more soundtrack sample, because again, Hikaru had amazing audio quality, and Planet Harriers is one of my favorite Sega soundtracks out of a game not called Daytona, and I'll be right back with more.
Get ready. Go!
I just love how intense the music is, but it's perfectly paired with the intense gameplay and the visuals, because this is just straight up solid gold to me, pun very much intended for those gold bars coming towards the screen. We are flying through space with all these particles flying past us, absolutely a metric shit ton of stuff going on. You can barely even focus on this game. It's basically like the ADHD of video games in all of the most fun ways, and that is why I love Planet Harriers. I love games like this, and if you like this, I couldn't recommend enough playing Solar Assault on MAME. It's basically the same style of game except from Konami, and is absolutely another hidden gem. But this game just absolutely has everything I want out of a video game. It has that quasi-Dreamcast era graphics, kind of like NAOMI, kind of like the Dreamcast, but in the Hikaru variant. It has amazing music and absolutely all of those fun, vibrant Sega colors that everyone knows, loves, and remembers from back in the day. because if there was one thing Sega absolutely insisted on cramming into all their arcade games, basically in the 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bucket variant, it is saturated colors, and I really miss those days. This was basically coming out around the time that I was just getting close to graduating high school, would play video games all the time, and honestly if 3D never got any better than what we see here on the Sega Hikaru, I would be totally fine with that. You leave me a comment down below and you tell me, have you ever played Planet Harriers before, and have you ever played on an arcade cabinet, because I would be curious. And trust me, this game, which is basically dummy rare at this point in time, I can't find one to buy, even broken, and I have not seen an arcade cabinet for this thing in an absolute eternity. And I love the final boss here, not really any spoiler whatsoever, just the deadlies. It's a bunch of cubes that make different shapes, and it really feels like Sega's developers and artists showing you we can push a lot of polygons on screen at once, and we can absolutely keep that frame rate up. And that really is fun, and that is the takeaway of something like Planet Harriers. It is that classic 2000s era arcade fun that if you went to arcades, if you played games back then, you really do crave. And because for the longest time this thing basically was almost impossible to emulate without it crashing, now you can sit down and play Planet Harriers from start to finish, get an absolutely incredible, enjoyable time out of it, and you don't need to be like me and try to buy finicky, expensive, original hardware just to get that experience in. So definitely play this one. If you have played it before, leave me a comment down below and you tell me your thoughts. But this kind of nebula in the background, almost looking like the Aurora Borealis, all of these different cubes flying around, the speed in this game, the gameplay, it just is a straight up 10 out of 10 out of 10 as far as I'm concerned. But we are done here. I'm going to keep fighting the boss, and I'm going to keep telling everyone who will listen, Planet Harriers is Sega's best hidden gem you haven't played. Bye-bye.